Welcome to our virtual cooking class. My name is Kate Watts. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist for the Live Life Well Employee Wellbeing team here at Cone Health. We are going to be making a honey sriracha meatball over brown rice with some carrot fries, basically a fun way to say roasted carrots, which is great for if you have kids. Carrot fries for green beans, all of those things can be very helpful in getting them to try new things. So we're making this under the theme Spice Up Your Lunchbox. So it's back to school time. And for many of us, if we're trying to eat a little healthier, we get in kind of a rut with the lunches that we pack for ourselves if we're on the go during a busy work day or a busy week. So this recipe I really like because it makes a pretty big quantity. You can enjoy it right away, but it packs up great for a very easy reheat lunch. So we've got 3 different components that we're going to make. We're going to start with the carrot fries or roasted carrots. Very simple recipe. You can pretty much roast any vegetable this way. Now, the recipe calls for the oven to be preheated at 425, but just a little hack if you're meal prepping. My meatballs that we're going to make are supposed to be at 375. So we're going to cut the difference and we're going to do 400 degrees. So my oven is preheated and we'll just cook the carrots a little bit less and the meatballs a little bit longer and it'll all work out great. So that way they can go in the oven at the same time. So for our carrot fries, we simply need some carrots. So I've got some fresh carrots here, a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper. And then I'm actually going to also add some ginger powder because it's going to go really well with the meatball recipe that has fresh ginger in the sauce. And that way it'll just kind of marry all the flavors and kind of give it that little Asian flair to go with the main dish. Now, I have not peeled my carrots. I have washed them really well. You actually can eat the peels of or the skin of your carrot, and there's going to be a little bit extra fiber. If you don't like the peels of your carrot, you can absolutely peel them at this point. But all I'm going to do is cut off the ends and then cut them into kind of a fry shape. So kind of like carrot sticks. So I'm just going to kind of cut them in half to a good fry length. And then we'll cut them in half down the middle so that I can lay them on the flat side. And that's going to make it much easier for me to cut them into our fry shapes without them rolling all over the place. I'm just using a nice big chef's knife here, and I'm cutting them into about 3 segments. And then if they're fairly thick, I'm going to cut them in half again. And there you go. A nice little carrot stick, carrot fry. So we're going to be roasting these in the oven. We're going to be making turkey meatballs today. So just a leaner option. They're going to be very flavorful with the sauce that we're going to make. We're using some very healthy spices, anti-inflammatory ingredients like garlic and fresh ginger. We are also literally spicing up the dish for our lunch with some sriracha sauce. If you aren't big on spicy dishes, you can make a very similar version of the sauce that I have going on the stove. That's just a honey ginger soy sauce, and just omit the sriracha or add a little bit of water or up the amount of soy sauce and honey to make up for the volume that the sriracha would have in the sauce. So you can absolutely make this in a milder version if you would like. Okay, so let's get our last carrots cut here. So we're going to put these into a bowl. You can do this right on the baking sheet as well, but I'm just going to do them in the bowl so that we can toss them with our olive oil. So just a tablespoon or two. Okay. And then we're going to sprinkle with salt and pepper. And the recipe will have amounts. I'm just going to eyeball here, and you can obviously adjust to your taste. You can omit the salt. You can add more black pepper, as I tend to do. And you can add additional spices if you'd like. So paprika goes really great on roasted carrots. So does cumin. But I'm going to do some ginger today and just toss those all around. Okay, get them nice and coated. Once everything's nice and shiny coated from that olive oil. And you can use avocado oil or canola oil, whatever you have, that's fine. We're going to take our baking sheet. I've got it lined, and I've put some nonstick spray on there. And then we're just going to line up our carrots, making sure they don't really touch so that they can get nice and roasted. If you overcrowd your baking sheet when you're roasting at a high temperature, things kind of start to steam and get a little bit more mushy. And we want these nice and crisp to kind of resemble French fries. So don't want to overcrowd too much. Get everything in a single layer. So we're going to pop these in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. About halfway through, it's good to check on them, maybe take a spatula, move them around, flip the pan around just to get them kind of nice and evenly roasted. Make sure nothing's getting burnt or stuck to the pan. So let's go ahead and get those in the oven. And we'll set a timer. For 20 minutes. Okay, so now let's get our meatballs going. So this is a recipe I'll be sharing with you. And if you're watching this recording online, all of the recipes will be down in the description box below. So for the meatballs, I'm going to do half of what the recipe calls for today. So I've got 1 pound of lean ground turkey. I purchased a 99% 1% fat. So 99% lean, you can do 98%. There's 85, 15, but really you're going to get a lot of flavor from the sauce. So I just went with the leanest option for our ground turkey. And then to that, we're going to add some whole wheat panko breadcrumbs. And I'm going to do a half a cup of these. We are also going to add an egg and green onions, garlic powder, salt, and black pepper. So let's go ahead and do our green onions first. So I've already washed these just like I'd wash my carrots. We're going to trim off the ends. And trim off, just if you see any that are kind of don't look as appetizing, you can trim off that end as well. Okay, so we're going to include all of this in the meatball mixture, but I am going to set aside some of the green part of the green onion to garnish at the end. So we're just going to do a nice little rocking motion with our knife, moving our fingers back as we go, keeping our fingers in the claw position, meaning fingers back, knuckles forward, so that if we were to bump into our knife, it's going to be stopped by our knuckles before it can accidentally cut our finger. Green onions go well in so many different recipes. So if you're kind of starting to build up your cooking muscle and becoming a more experienced chef in the kitchen, I feel like keeping on hand green onions, garlic, and maybe regular onions, you can flavor many, many, many different types of dishes just with those few ingredients. Okay, so let's set aside some of these green leafy parts. And let's get the rest into our meatball mixture. Okay. Next, we're going to add in our 4th teaspoon of garlic powder, 4th teaspoon of salt, 4th teaspoon of black pepper. So again, you can adjust those amounts as you like. So let's do our garlic powder. Usually I would just kind of eyeball this and do a little extra. Of these herbs and spices is always a good thing for flavor. Okay, black pepper. And of course, as much as I can, cutting the salt down half of what the recipe asked or eliminating it altogether. Up to you. Okay, so I did about half of what it calls for. So let's crack our egg to bind. And if you don't have an egg on hand, you can always bind with just a little bit of water or a little bit of oil. Okay, make sure I got everything and we'll mix these together. All right, so let's mash our meatballs together. Just want it to be well combined so that really that egg is completely mixed in, so that when we go to form our meatballs, we get them staying together and not falling apart. We are going to bake these meatballs in the oven, as I mentioned. So the recipe calls for 375 for 20 to 25 minutes, and we are doing ours at 400 degrees, so we'll probably stick to that 20 minutes. I'll check it halfway through to flip them over. Okay, so that's pretty well combined. I'll give it one more mix with my spoon here. You could absolutely use a lean ground beef here, or a ground chicken. I'm just following the recipe with the ground turkey. Okay, so I'm using a little scoop that's sprayed with some nonstick spray here. Let's get our pan. Usually I would do this by hand, but I wanted to find a little cleaner way to do it on our class. So I'm just using a little scoop and a spoon, and then we'll just put those right on our baking sheet. So a pound of turkey should get you about 12 meatballs. So following this recipe with the 2 pounds of ground turkey is going to make 24 meatballs for you. So it's a very good amount for doing some batch cooking. And the nice thing is that these meatballs themselves are pretty open to being flavored up however you want. So if you want to use our honey sriracha sauce on half of your batch for the recipe we're making, you could also use these in other dishes, other recipes, and flavor them up with different sauces or seasonings. So you have the option there using this kind of as your main base. So there's our meatballs on our baking sheet. We'll pop those in the oven. Okay, set this aside to bake later. All right, so let's get to our sauce. And then I've got our carrots and meatballs already made, so we can see what the finished product would look like in about 20 minutes. And then we'll plate it all together. So let's assemble our sauce here. So let me just read out the ingredients to you. We have 1/4 cup of sriracha, Again, you could do a sweeter chili, a milder chili sauce, or you could omit this altogether. We've got 3 tablespoons reduced sodium soy sauce, 3 tablespoons rice vinegar. You could use another vinegar, white wine vinegar, if you don't have rice vinegar, but I do really like the rice wine vinegar for the Asian dish. 3 tablespoons of honey. You could also use maple syrup or agave syrup. A tablespoon of grated fresh ginger, 3 cloves of garlic, minced, and a half a teaspoon of toasted sesame oil. So I am going to use fresh ginger, but I'm going to use my convenience product of my already minced garlic. So for our ginger, first thing you want to do is peel it. You can use a knife, a peeler, or actually I find a spoon works really well to get in these kind of nooks and crannies of the ginger. So I'm going to just use my spoon down the side, and you're going to scrape the skin off just like so. All the way around. It's going to smell so good. Yeah, so just kind of around the parts that stick out. I just find that a spoon works really well. I don't have to cut them off completely and waste any of that ginger. So ginger has so many great health properties for you. Most namely it being a very potent antioxidant and anti-inflammatory, so helping fight off inflammation in the body, helping keep you healthy, prevent you from getting sick. I have peeled about an inch down from the base, and I'm going to just cut that off, what I have peeled, and then I'll save the rest for the recipe. You can just use a small chef's knife to mince your your ginger, or you could use a garlic press to mince it as well. So we're just going to give this a nice little mince. Going to slice it. If you didn't have fresh ginger, you could just use ginger powder like I did on the carrots, but I really like the fresh ginger in this recipe. I think it really makes the sauce. So now I'm just going to go across in a rocking motion and chop those strips into smaller squares. And I'll just continue to grate, bunch, and rock until I get a nice minced chop. Smells so good. This sauce makes a really good marinade for other proteins as well. So it's really good on salmon, be good on chicken. Okay, so there's our ginger ready to go. So let's go ahead and add in our 1/4 cup of sriracha to our saucepan. And I found this sriracha that had as few ingredients as possible. And I didn't want it to have too much sweetener of any kind because we're adding honey to it. So this just has red jalapeno pepper mash, white vinegar, water, sugar, garlic, and salt. So that is a very pretty natural choice for a sauce at the grocery store, if you ask me. All right, now we're going to do 3 tablespoons of our low sodium soy sauce. Okay, we're going to do 3 tablespoons of our rice vinegar. And again, if you are not doing this sriracha, if you want a milder version, then for that 1/4 cup, you could use either water or you could increase the soy sauce and vinegar and honey just to cover for that, or you could just omit it altogether. It's just going to be a little bit less volume of sauce. Okay, so let's do the 3 tablespoons of our honey. And if you wanted it to be a little bit lower in sugar, you could probably half the amount of honey as well. Okay. And then we are going to add in our fresh ginger and garlic and sesame oil. So let's do our ginger. Just going to toss that right in there. We're doing the equivalent of 3 cloves of garlic. So we're going to do 3 teaspoons of our already minced garlic here. So kind of equal parts ginger and garlic. And then just a little 1/4 teaspoon of sesame oil. So if you don't have sesame oil, another oil will do just fine. So this is what your sauce is going to look like, all the ingredients. And we've got to whisk it really well to get that honey incorporated. So the recipe instructions tell you to boil this on the stove at a medium heat. So we would turn on the heat and boil it. And we would mix with our whisk the whole time as it comes to a boil. I've already done this step. And then once you reach a boil at medium heat, you can stop whisking, lower the heat to low. So we're going to bring it down to a simmer. And then we're just going to let it cook for 8 to 10 minutes so that the sauce will thicken. Now, I've already done that step. So I've got our nice thickened sauce here. And if you want to even do this as the first step before you start cooking, you can allow it to just continue to reduce on the stove. Like I've just had it sitting there at low, so it's gotten nice and thick. So what we're going to do now is assemble everything together. We're going to take our sauce. We're going to pour it into a clean bowl. We're going to get our meatballs and toss them. Smells delicious. It's out of the way here. Okay, so our meatballs are still cooking. I've got a batch that I've already completed. Let me show you what they look like out of the oven. So they're very light because they're turkey. They've got a good browning on them. I did flip them one time. Okay. And we're going to just drop them into our sauce here. Okay. So we'll get those nice and incorporated. Now the recipe calls for serving this over brown rice. So you could cook some brown rice. You could cook some quinoa, couscous. All of those would go great with this recipe. I did go ahead and cook some brown rice. So I've got brown rice in a bowl. And then because this is our Spice Up Your Lunchbox class, I've got our containers ready to go for lunch with a portion of rice in them as well. So we're going to do 1 lunch for now and 2 for this week. So we're getting our meatballs nice and combined with that sauce. See, now they're looking more like what we would picture as a meatball made from beef. Okay. So we're going to put our meatballs over the rice, and then I'm going to pour the extra sauce on as well. Now let's get our carrots. So once your carrots come out of the oven, nice roasted carrot sticks, we're going to add some of these to our bowl. And then we're going to garnish. So I've got some toasted sesame seeds, as well as that green onion we put to the side. So let's get that garnish on. Okay. Sesame seeds. I would not skip this part. This is my favorite. Really, on any kind of stir-fry dish, toasted sesame seed, little crunch. So yummy. All right, let's add some green onion on top. Okay, here's our final product. So we've got honey sriracha meatballs, brown rice, some roasted carrots, little extra honey sriracha glaze over top, some toasted sesame seeds, and some roasted carrots. We've got it ready to go into the lunchbox for the next 2 days. Here we go. Let's give it a try. Okay. Cut into one of these meatballs. Sauce. Mmm. Mmm. Good amount of heat. Good combination of sweet heat and the savoriness of that soy sauce. Mmm. The carrots are delicious. So good. Also nice and sweet and kind of cools down the spicy bite from the meatballs. I think y'all will like this one. Really good. Something different for your lunches. Thank y'all for joining me. I hope you give this one a try. And I'll see you next month for our next virtual cooking class. Thanks.